Back tonight, you're in Focus. A new draft definition of types of tertiary institutions has sent the strongest signal yet that the government may downgrade or close universities that fail to live up to what is required of them. Among those requirements are that universities must be a broad range of published research, must contribute to their local community, and must offer a lot of doctoral options. Now, the new draft guidelines have been met with a strong rebuke from the South African Union of Students, whose national spokesperson, Asive Dlanjwa, joins us alongside the General Secretary of the National Tertiary Education Union, Abbott. Gentlemen, good evening. Good to have you with us, and thank you very much for your time this evening. So the Department of Higher Education, as the custodian of the Higher Education Act, they say part of the considerations of their work is to ensure that they transform the education sector, the higher education sector in particular, by ensuring that the system that is there is derived from a range of institutions, but also there's diversity in terms of the quality of the learning opportunities, and there is an expanded reach as far as the institutions are concerned. And so, as the custodians of the Act, in continually trying to transform this particular space, they've come up with this thing of 3 types of higher education institutions as defined in the Act. Is this in and of itself a good move, Asive, towards the transformation of the higher education sector?
Good evening, Thabo, to you and your viewers, and also my fellow guest. Thabo, we are yet to make an official comment as the union on the draft policy, but off the cuff, and briefly having skimmed through it and engaged a few of the colleagues, we think it would in fact be a good move. There is nothing that we have been able to identify that seems to be sinister, or even that suggests, by the way, that any of the current institutions that we have, that they might be shut down. The reason we think it might be good is because we have been, for the longest time, you will remember even in our previous statements, have been calling for the transformation of the sector. Number one. Number two, we have been also calling that institutions of higher learning need to be capacitated to be able to do the third thing, which I'm going to speak on also, which is to broaden access and ensure that there is a wide participation and that access is broadened to all South Africans, but also that our institutions are able to respond directly to the socio-economic needs of South Africa, which we believe currently the sector as it stands, it is not able to respond adequately, efficiently to the challenges that we are facing as a society and as a country, be it social or be it economic. So as the policy, briefly when we look at it, if it seeks to improve those things, improve access, broaden access, transform the sector, and then ensure that the sector is flexible to be able to adhere, or rather to address and respond to the various challenges that we are facing as a society, we would most definitely welcome it. And lastly, we had also said that we would want a sector that not necessarily that is institutions that are regional in their approach, but the reality is that we've got 9 universities in South Africa, for instance, and many TVET colleges are across the country in different provinces. And it would probably make sense that these institutions, based on the provinces and the prevalent socioeconomic conditions in which way they exist, that they should be able to respond directly to the challenges that they face within those particular regions, even though not necessarily being regional in their approach. Yeah. So if the sector, or rather the proposed policy, will address those things, we think it would definitely be a good thing for the sector and the country.
Grant, what do you make of the 3 types of higher education institution that are being recognized in this policy? I mean, by definition, this means that, for example, before even you become a university, whether you're a public or a private institution, you would need to fulfill certain criteria. So you won't be a standalone university all on your own, as in a full university, before you have firstly, for example, been classified as a university college and have met those requirements.
Yes, thanks. Good evening, Thabo, and to your viewers, and also to Asive. I think likewise, we circulated it to all of our branches. NTEU has branches across the country, and we're still gathering information to make a comprehensive submission by the deadline. So likewise, many of the comments or observations I would make will be just preliminary at this stage, having also read through the policy. But I think picking up between the lines of what is going on is, it seems to me that what could be attempted to be addressed here is a governance struggle that exists within our higher education institutions. Conservatively, I would say that 40 to 50% of university councils are probably dysfunctional and not operating particularly well, or are operating as engine rooms for university capture. And so it would seem to me that what this policy is perhaps attempting to do by creating this category of university colleges that would effectively fall under universities is to perhaps try and address those that are not sustainable in terms of their governance structures. I see what is being said in terms of the transformation and what needs to be transformed. I don't think the policy goes far enough in terms of outlining that very clearly in terms of how it's going to be able to do that. I don't think this policy will be able to comprehensively say how it's going to transform institutions. There are some good points, but there are some, I think, challenges that we are going to face, and it could be more of a hindrance than a advantage.
Okay, talk to us about those challenges that could be a hindrance.
I think some of the challenges, as I said, just with regards to the administration of universities or governance of universities, we see that right now it seems that the only avenue available to the department is to place a university that's not functioning or dysfunctional under administration. Now, very often, almost always, we see that those institutions come out later as worse off. And we need to be addressing the governance, those governance structures that are simply there to perhaps enrich and serve certain people and individuals. We can't just allow that to continue. And so it seems that the intent of the policy is to try and address that and still maintain a degree of institutional autonomy. And we would say that is a good thing.
Yeah.
But does it go far enough? I don't know.
Yeah.
Does
it go far enough to maintain institutional autonomy? Is that what your concern is?
One of the concerns is that institutional autonomy could become could become affected and almost fall by the wayside in a sense. But one of the other concerns we have is this classification in terms of research. If a lecturer or an employee within an institution is employed as a researcher, and that institution that he's employed in turns out to become a HEC or a UC, how is that research or that person's job going to be affected as a researcher? How's his work going to be affected? Because it'll have to be in terms of the understanding of this policy. So in our submission, we would write that and ask questions around how that's going to be, because each institution is autonomous. Each institution is an institution governed by itself. So you can't shift researchers around between institutions kind of willy-nilly. So that's questions that our members have initially already raised. And we will be looking to try and address that in the policy. The last thing I want to maybe mention is that the policy doesn't talk at all about how it affects staff in general. I read somewhere over the weekend that a question was asked about how it will affect the salaries and benefits of vice-chancellors. I almost feel to say that, with respect, I couldn't care less about the benefits and salaries of vice-chancellors. I would like to know how it's going to affect the salaries and benefits of the lowest paid employees in an institution. Vice-chancellors can go on sabbatical leave for 6 months, and the institution can operate quite nicely without them. But get rid of your gardeners or your maintenance workers, lecturers, admin staff, and you will know within a day or two very soon that they missed something. And those are the questions that need to be asked and need to be answered, because that will definitely be affected.
Right, let's take a break. When we come back, I'll get Asive to take a bite at some of those issues there that are being raised by Grant, and take this a little bit further. A new policy, draft policy, as you can hear, various bodies still studying the work and preparing to comment on it. But on initial look at it, it seeks to establish 3 types of institutions. These are colleges, university colleges, and full universities, and there's criteria that speaks to each individual sector and what it needs to fulfill. We'll talk more on that. What are your thoughts if you have been watching that closely? 072 110 5584. 072 110 5584. We'll take your messages in a moment. Stay with us. Back tonight here on In Focus, Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405. Conversation continues then around the draft proposals and the recognition of 3 types of higher education institutions in the country. Asive Dlanjwa joins us on that conversation alongside Grant Abbott. Now, Asive, on the governance question, right, there is a sense, maybe, I don't know, the reason why they're bringing this up, that there are institutions that are not necessarily on par administratively, in terms of management, in terms of academic and quality assurance systems, which I suppose is something that you will agree would be critical for creating and establishing an autonomous university. So there's a sense that maybe the department would like to get a handle on that aspect of things before they can let you fly on your own, if they will let you do that.
Thank you, Chabo. I think, all of us will agree, there are institutions that have struggled over the years, and some carry on to do, in terms of their governance capacity, but also administratively. This is evidenced by the fact that quite a few institutions have been put under administration, etc. So I think we can agree then. But to the extent to which there is a concern over how the policy will, notwithstanding the fact that we'll make official comment on it after we've thoroughly read it, but to the extent to which there are concerns that it might curb or might have a negative impact or influence on the governance capacity of current institutions that we have now in the value chain. I really don't see how that will. If anything, based on this sort of apprenticeship approach at which where universities will guide and provide support administratively, especially administratively, and in terms of teaching and learning, etc., across the whole spectrum. So to the extent which they'll be able to provide that support to these university colleges, that can only be a good thing from where I'm sitting. I do not think that on its own will solve the governance challenges that we're facing in the sector, but also at the same time, I do not see how this the promulgation of this particular policy will affect negatively, including, by the way, the issue of institutional autonomy, because in fact, the suggestion that this policy would affect negatively issues of institutional autonomy or etc. Feeds into the misconception that certain institutions might be downgraded, which, as I said, from where we have seen, we do not see what could warrant, what from the policy warrants a downgrading of any institution. If anything, it refers to colleges and campuses, specific campuses, not universities that would be downgraded. And in fact, Thabo, I think we must say this. As the students, we have always decried for many years, in any case, what we believe to have been an unchecked institutional autonomy, or autonomy that institutions enjoyed, sometimes that proved to be out of step and out of, in fact, they began to behave as if you like, as ivory towers, and they were devoid and removed from the realities of the communities in which they existed. As a matter of fact, their output that they were able to, that they were producing, was not able to ensure that the students that whom they were producing and the graduates that they were producing were able to respond directly to the socio-economic needs of the communities in which they were coming out. And we think maybe this policy might address that. So I already, from the students' perspective, in any case, we believe that the current autonomy that the universities are enjoying is a lot unchecked, and in fact, most of them, you would swear that they are not even in South Africa in the manner in which they carry themselves. So we don't think that will be an issue as far as that is concerned. So yeah, I do not think.
Do you think though, having said that, do you think the existing universities, right, the existing institutions have the capacity, for example, to be offering a full range of undergraduate qualifications? Not only that, but have the potential to conduct a degree of research as articulated in this particular policy on an ongoing basis? Are they doing that already? Or is there a sense that maybe, again, you might need to beef up your research capacity? Or as Grant suggests, I don't know whether he's suggesting that you might need to be bringing or importing capacity from somewhere into some universities for them to be able to keep their status.
Capacities of institutions to be able to conduct research will vary from institution to institution. But as things stand, Mr. Grant will correct me if I'm wrong, there is not a university in South Africa that does not have the obligation and the responsibility to produce research. The extent to which they do and that research output will vary, as I say, and the volume of that research. But they are all mandated or obligated, if you like, and have the mandate to produce research. So this policy will not be requiring of them anything that has not been required of them pre the policy. Already, as things stand, there is not a single institution in South Africa, or rather university, that does not have the responsibility to produce research. Obviously, this has been curtailed and this has been not impeded per se, but constrained by many challenges, which mostly speaks to the capacity of each institution, the funding that each institution will have to conduct, and all other frameworks that would have to be in place for an institution to be able to do that. So obviously that will vary, but I do not think they will be having an added responsibility in terms of producing research. But however, what can be a concern, which I think would be relatively reasonable, is the concern that says, do the current institutions that we have the capacity to provide above and beyond to go above and beyond the responsibility that they have to so to speak, to be to oversee or to provide support to other institutions as it pertains to research. Now, that is something that we can be concerned about. Like, for instance, to give you an example, let's say we establish a university college. Our current universities, do they have the capacity to support those university colleges? And the answer to that also, I suppose, will be not all institutions will be able to. The reality is that the extent to which the University of Witwatersrand will have a capacity to oversee and provide support to University College will vary from the support that the University of Zululand will have in the event that the University of Zululand would even have the capacity to take over or a university college and bring them to a university status. But other than that, I don't think we should be fretting about research for the current institutions. Hey, now we have to do research. They have always, in any case, had the obligation and the responsibility to produce research. Maybe we can strengthen the framework to ensure that we expand that research output and maybe use this policy to say, what is the qualitative nature of that research, and as far as much as it has to respond to the challenges that they face in the region in which it exists, but also the broader socioeconomic challenges that we're facing as a country.
Yeah. The other question that I'm looking at here, but I don't know if it is expressed in this particular policy, as part of the transformation goals. I mean, as part of governance, Grant, the range and scope that is being here has been articulated here on governance, for example, the establishing of governing boards and the establishing of executive committees, audit risk committees, and so on and so forth. Does this policy articulate specifically the makeup of those communities or committees in terms of demographics and representation?
If you read through the policy, it does talk about governing boards, and it does state who should formulate some of those committees and those boards. But even in that, the institutions that will have governing boards, for example, a university college, as we've interpreted the policy as it stands right now, is that a university college will in fact be under the trusteeship of a university. So that calls into question already, is it autonomous or is it semi-autonomous? That's just looking at the basic framework of the policy. So it does talk about the governing boards, but it's not if it's under the trusteeship of a university, then that board, is it reportable to a council of that university that is under, or is it somehow still got some form of autonomy or not? That's what we're not sure of. And the term about trusteeship is mentioned exactly in the policy like that, but it doesn't for us fully qualify it. Just in terms of the research, just responding to Asive, is that it does for us affect the 20. If we look at it, it does affect the 26 universities we have, because the policy can take some of those universities and make them HECs. Now, a higher education college. Now, the definition, or as we see the scope, is that it says that an HEC doesn't have a research mandate. It might be a different interpretation that we have at the moment, and we'll study. That's exactly why we're going to study it more. But what happens with those researchers in those institutions? The question is also then, under a university college versus a university, what kind of research is going to be requested or mandated?
All right, let's take a break there, right on that note there, as that line begins to have a little bit of glitches. We'll come back in a moment, wrap up this conversation, and take your thoughts. 072-110-5584, Asive Dlanjwa, as well as Grant Abbott, helping us in this conversation. In Focus continues shortly. Back with you tonight, Joan in Focus on Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405. As we wrap up the conversation, we are still with the South African Union of Students, National Spokesperson Asive Dlanjwa, and the General Secretary of the National Tertiary Education Union, Grant Abbott. Asive, let me get your views as well. I mean, as you're saying, as a student body, you've always been calling for the transformation of our higher education sector. As you say, in some instances, you even wonder the type of output that is coming from there, if really these are South Africans. So will you, in a sense, from the first glance, be proposing how those boards and those executive committees should be formulated?
No, most definitely. I think we will comment, number one, on the establishment of those institutions, and number two, the structure of those institutions, and number three, obviously, the governance of those institutions. We have always been interested in the governance of the institution. You are correct. The transformation of the sector goes part and parcel with the governance of those institutions. So we'll definitely be commenting on all of that. One of the things which I've already alluded to very briefly, we will carry on to make submissions to this effect, is that we actually believe that we need to be able to have another conversation around, and probably this policy will open even an opportunity for us to have that conversation again with regards to the institutional autonomy of universities and how far does it go, and the extent to which it benefits, and it is for the interest of the majority of South Africans, particularly as far as it's able to respond to the challenges of the poor and the working class. So those are the things that we will make sure that they find expression in those in that policy, because we think as currently and this is why we want the transformation of the sector, because as things stand, the reality is that at the receiving end of this unchecked and elusive institutional autonomy of institutions is the interest that is often always forgotten of the poor and the working class, and number one. And number two, we have always been concerned about the state of institutions. Like, for instance, recently we have written to the department regarding the state of the Central University of Technology. The university has been in a perpetual state of collapse. We have been saying this. I mean, at a point, there was, you did not have a vice chancellor, did not have a deputy vice chancellor, did not have a chair of council, did not have a deputy chair of council. They were either suspended or had resigned. And this is, and we cannot accept this. And this is the only, you see, the media will not know this, South Africans will not know this, but it is the only institution that has endured a strike literally probably for the last 5 months. The institution has not seen stability whatsoever. These are the challenges that we are facing, because, and that these are the institutions that are catering to the poor and the working class majority of South Africans. So we are really concerned, and we're hoping that maybe this policy will also give us an opportunity to comment on these things and see how do we create a sector that is much more agile. Why must we, so that we do not take a year to 2 years to stabilize an institution that is servicing thousands of students. These are some of the things that we think this policy should open an opportunity for us to begin to conversate about.
How well are our institutions, Asive, involved and engaged in activities within the locality of where they are, and are directly contributing to the wider development of those communities? Because that's one of the criteria that is cited here of what a university should be doing.
They are honestly, except for a few, sorry to use this word, sometimes useless community engagement projects, there are very few institutions that are actively and vigorously involved in the development of the regions in which they find themselves in. We are not speaking a cosmetic involvement, Thabo, where they bring in a few grade 12, show them statues and buildings, and this is what, unfortunately, the majority of institutions are doing. But where the economic development, even of their specific regions, to illustrate this to you, you've got research output that is coming out year in and year out. Obviously, you understand most research output, the cycle could be anything from 2 to 7 years. But with that research output, often it is devoid and it is incongruent with the challenges that are being faced in that specific region. literally, as the term goes, for academic purposes. Literally, most conversations and research that is happening is for purely academic purposes, where we are spending hundreds and hundreds of millions. And so you can have in two institutions. In Free State, you'll have two universities. In Gauteng, you'll have three, etc., etc. In Eastern Cape, you'll have 3, 4. But when you look at the research output and to the extent to which it speaks directly to the economic challenges of that region, you do not see it, number one. Number two, you are dealing with GBV. We dealt with I'll start with GBV, and you also speak to the issue of the COVID. And then you say, to what extent have our institutions been able to respond directly to the social challenges that are being faced in their specific regions in which they find themselves in? And institutions are not playing this part. What is the graduate attribute? What confidence do we have that when a student exits the University of Limpopo, they are able to respond directly to issues of GBV when they get to their community? As trained and empowered by the institution. You take COVID, how many institutions were able to respond directly to the challenges that were posed by COVID, but also to the aftermath of COVID? And the reality is it's few to none institutions that have been able to do that. So to answer your question, a few institutions are able to go beyond the cosmetic, cliche, community engagement projects to actually deal with the bread and butter socioeconomic issues that are faced by the poor working class and working class majority of our South Africans.
Yeah. Grant, your reflection on the effectiveness of the community institutions, rather universities in particular, in engaging with issues that bedevil their communities.
Yeah, I fully agree, 100%. I think a lot of the community engagement that's been talked about is lip service. When we talk about research outputs, there's essentially two kinds of research outputs, and we probably do need to be, and this policy, hopefully, when we engage with it, we can address the fact that research outputs do need to address the needs of a struggling economy, both locally, provincially, and nationally. And it needs to do probably more so. There is also what is called blue sky research, which is like, I think, what Asive was talking about in terms of research for academic purposes. It's like research for the sake of research. It has its place, but it can't be the main. It can't be the main thing. And often its place is actually generational. It's something you see the benefit of much later in terms of technology. So you'll see it in 2 or 3 generations, the benefit of that research now. But right now, where South Africa is, I would say that the research we should be focusing on is research that affects our local communities and our struggling economy, to be honest.
Gentlemen, I appreciate your time. I mean, from both of you, as we wrap up, Grant, let's start with you. Do you see this particular policy, barring 1 or 2, 3 issues that you've raised, having difficulty being approved and getting the support of academia?
I see it firstly as a positive step and a positive avenue for which to engage. When a new policy comes out like this, it is done for the purposes of engaging, and it's done to address things that we're struggling with. And we do have a struggling sector. So I see it as a positive opportunity to engage. And that's what NTEU intends to do, is that we're going to positively engage with the policy so that it comes out with something that is going to benefit the entire country, and so that South Africa can benefit its local communities and the global community in which it lives. So, yeah, we do see that in the positive light that it has. It's my understanding that it also does need to go through Parliament. I might be wrong on that, but the cross-references are that we would still be a little way off before it is implemented.
No, certainly. Asive, do you see this getting broad support?
Yes, Thabo. I think briefly having skimmed through it, I do not see why there should be any resistance towards it. If anything, I think it seeks to broaden the capacity of the sector to be able to accommodate not only more students but more streams, but also make the sector a little bit more agile and a little bit more flexible to the day-to-day and the short to medium term challenges that we are facing as a country. I think it will be able to allow us to do that. So I do not see why we should have a problem getting it through. But obviously, I will not put the cart before the horse. Let us engage with it. Let us allow all other various stakeholders across the country to be able to engage in it. There might be something that we are missing. I think we should also allow even industry to be able to engage on it. And then after those comments, I think we should have a relatively good working document. So I do not see why it should not have the necessary support.
Gentlemen, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on and joining us tonight here on In Focus. That is the South African Union of Students National Spokesperson Asive Dlanjwa and the General Secretary of the National Tertiary Education Union, Grant Abbott.